Chapter 1: The Man in Chains. The heavy oak doors of St. Matthew's Church creaked open, and a wave of cold November air swept through the crowded room. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. For a moment, it felt like even the light dimmed. I stood in the doorway, dressed in the same orange prison uniform I had worn for the past 3 years. My wrists were shackled, my ankles bound, the faint clink of metal echoing against the marble floor as I stepped forward. 2 correctional officers flanked me, their expressions unreadable, their presence a reminder that I didn't belong here, not anymore. All eyes were on me. I could feel the heat of their judgment, the shock rippling through the rows of dark suits and black dresses. To them, I wasn't a son mourning his father. I was the shame of the family, the convict who dared to show his face at a respected judge's funeral. My mother gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. Her veil trembled as she turned to look at me, her eyes red and swollen from hours of crying. But when she saw me, her tears stopped, replaced by something between sorrow and disbelief. My sister, Clara, refused to meet my gaze. She turned away sharply, gripping her husband's arm as if my presence might contaminate her perfect world. And then there was Daniel, my older brother. He stood near the front pew, head bowed in grief, but when his eyes lifted and met mine, I saw a flicker of something darker than mourning. Guilt, maybe. Fear. I couldn't be sure. He quickly looked away, pretending I wasn't there. The guards gestured for me to move forward. I obeyed, each step slow and heavy, the sound of my chains slicing through the silence like a curse. As I walked past the familiar faces of my father's colleagues, neighbors, and church members, I could almost hear their thoughts. Why is he here? How dare he show his face? Hasn't he done enough? At the front of the church stood the coffin, mahogany, polished to a mirror shine. The flag of the justice system draped neatly across it, symbolizing the man inside, Judge Arthur Lane. My father. The man who had taught me right from wrong. The man who had once told me, a man's word is his honor, son. Never break it. And yet, when I was accused of a crime I didn't commit, he was the one who broke his word first. I stopped at the back pew, refusing to sit closer. I didn't belong among them anymore. The air was thick with incense and whispers. The pastor began to speak about my father's service, his discipline, his contributions to the law. His voice echoed faintly through the high ceiling. But I barely heard him. My thoughts were elsewhere, in a courtroom 3 years ago, when my father had sat in the front row, stone-faced, while I was sentenced to 10 years in prison for embezzlement. He hadn't spoken then. Not even when I looked at him, silently begging for help. He hadn't visited me once after that day. And now, here I was, his disgraced son, watching his coffin lower into a bed of flowers and regret. I clenched my fists, the cuffs digging into my skin. Part of me wanted to leave, to escape the stares, the shame, the memories. But another part of me couldn't move. I had come for a reason, one I couldn't yet explain, even to myself. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I wanted answers. Or maybe I wanted to stand before his coffin and ask the question that had haunted me for 3 years. Why did you let me suffer for something you knew I didn't do, Father? The pastor's voice faded into silence. Somewhere behind me, a door clicked shut. The funeral had begun, and so had the reckoning. Chapter 2: The Judge's Son. I sat quietly in the back pew, my hands resting on my knees, the cold bite of the steel cuffs cutting against my wrists. The service continued, but my mind was elsewhere, drifting through memories that refused to fade. To the world, my father was a man of honor. To me, he was a mystery I could never solve. Judge Arthur Lane, the name still carried weight in this town. He had been the kind of man newspapers quoted, the kind of man lawyers feared and respected in equal measure. His verdicts were sharp, his words final. He believed in truth, in justice, in the rule of law. And yet, when the law turned against his own son, he had stood by and let it happen. 3 years ago, I had been charged with embezzling nearly $200,000 from the courthouse development fund. I had been working as a financial assistant under the city treasurer, my first stable job after college. I loved the work, the responsibility, the sense that I was building something real. Then the accusations came: forged documents, missing funds, secret transfers. All fingers pointed to me. And when they found my signature on a transfer I'd never made, I thought my father would step in, defend me, at least speak for me. He didn't. The day of the trial, he sat silently in the courtroom, his face carved from stone. I remember turning toward him as the jury delivered the verdict, guilty. He didn't look away. Didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. When the sentence was read, 10 years in state prison, I searched for his eyes, desperate for some sign that he still believed me. But all I saw was resignation. A quiet, cold acceptance. That image haunted me through sleepless nights in my cell, through every fight, every punishment, every bitter breath. Now, sitting in the church, watching mourners wipe tears from their eyes, I wondered what they were crying for. The man they loved? Or the image of him they had built, the flawless judge who upheld justice no matter the cost? My mother's shoulders shook as she wept quietly beside Clara. I could feel her sorrow, but also the distance. She hadn't visited me either. My family had fallen silent after my conviction, as if pretending I didn't exist would erase the scandal from their lives. Except Daniel. My brother had come once, just once, 6 months after my sentencing. He'd looked nervous, thin, his fingers tapping against the glass during our brief visit. I remember asking him, why didn't Dad speak up? He'd looked at me with something like guilt in his eyes, then said, he had no choice. You made mistakes, James. Maybe it's time to accept them. Then he left. And I never saw him again. Now he stood near the coffin, dressed in a sharp black suit, greeting guests with practiced politeness. He looked every bit the respectable son, the one who had followed in my father's footsteps, the one who still carried the family's pride. But as I watched him from the back row, something in his posture made my stomach twist. He wouldn't look at me. Not once. His jaw was tight, his shoulders tense. It wasn't grief. It was fear. The pastor's voice echoed faintly from the front. Judge Lane believed in righteousness above all things. He was a man who never wavered, even when it cost him dearly. The word stabbed at me. Because maybe that was the truth, or maybe it was the lie my father told himself every day. I bowed my head, whispering under my breath, you believed in justice, Father, but not in me. The chains at my wrists rattled softly, breaking the silence around me. And for the first time, I wondered, had my father's silence been loyalty to the law, or a cover for something far darker? Chapter 3, Whispers of the Past. The pastor's voice became a faint hum as my thoughts drifted away from the present and sank into the shadows of the past. Each word he spoke about my father's honor and justice felt like a blade twisting deeper. I had heard those same words 100 times before, from his friends, his colleagues, the reporters who admired him. They didn't know the truth. None of them did. To the world, Judge Arthur Lane was a symbol of integrity. But to me, he was a man who had chosen silence over his own son's salvation. I still remembered the night before my arrest, clear as glass, unbroken by time. It had been raining hard, the kind of relentless downpour that drowned out thought. I was sitting at my desk, going through files for the Courthouse Development Fund, when I noticed something strange, an unauthorized withdrawal logged under my access code. The numbers didn't add up. I had called Daniel immediately. He was the only person with admin clearance besides me. Did you move any money from the account? I'd asked. He'd laughed, too casually. Don't worry about it, little brother. It's just an internal adjustment. I'll fix it tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. By the next morning, I was being questioned by investigators. The withdrawal had turned into a transfer, straight into an offshore account with my name on it. Someone had forged my signature. The evidence was airtight. I had gone to my father's house that night, desperate, wet, half out of breath. He opened the door in his robe, his eyes heavy with disappointment before I'd even spoken. "Dad, you have to believe me," I said. "I didn't take anything. Someone's setting me up. He didn't invite me in. He didn't even ask who I thought it was. He simply said, 'Go home, James. Don't make this worse.'" The next morning, I was arrested. Now, sitting in that church, staring at his coffin, I could still hear the echo of those words. Don't make this worse. He had known. Deep down, he had to. My father wasn't blind. He had seen enough cases to recognize the signs of a cover-up. But he'd chosen not to act. Why? To protect the family name? The law? Or someone he loved more than me? My gaze drifted toward Daniel again. He stood stiffly near the pulpit, shaking hands with one of Father's old colleagues. His expression was polite, almost rehearsed. But there was a flicker in his eyes, a quiet unease that made something inside me tighten. When the crowd bowed their heads for prayer, Daniel's gaze flicked toward me for the briefest second. Just one glance. But it was enough. He looked at me not with hatred or pity, but fear. That single look answered 1,000 questions I'd carried through sleepless nights in my cell. The missing funds, the falsified signatures, the offshore accounts. It all led back to him. My brother. The golden son. The one who had everything to lose if the truth came out. And my father had covered for him. Judge Arthur Lane, the champion of justice, had sacrificed one son to save the other. My hands clenched in my lap, the cuffs biting into my skin. A mix of rage and grief surged through me, fighting for control. I wanted to shout, to stand and expose him right there in front of everyone, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not without proof. The pastor's voice brought me back. Let us remember the judge as a man who always chose what was right, even when it was hard. I almost laughed, a bitter, broken sound that I swallowed before it escaped. No one in that room knew that his greatest act of righteousness had destroyed his own family. As the choir began to sing softly, I leaned back against the pew, eyes fixed on the coffin. Don't worry, Father, I whispered under my breath. The truth won't stay buried forever. And somewhere across the aisle, Daniel's shoulders stiffened, as if he'd heard me. Chapter 4, The Stranger's Approach. When the final hymn faded and the murmurs of farewell filled the church, I stayed seated. The crowd began to move, black coats and whispered condolences flowing toward the doors like a slow river. But I couldn't stand yet. My legs felt heavy, my heart heavier. I wasn't ready to leave my father, not yet. Not until I understood why. The guards beside me shifted, waiting for a signal to escort me out. I could tell they wanted to be anywhere but here. They were used to inmates with tattoos and cold eyes, not men in handcuffs sitting quietly in the back of a church, trying to say goodbye to their fathers. As the mourners thinned, I noticed Daniel standing at the front, talking to the pastor and the funeral director. He moved like a man who wanted to be seen as strong, composed. But even from this distance, I could see the tension in his jaw, the stiffness in his shoulders. I wondered if he could feel me watching him. I wondered if guilt burned as sharply as rage. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. An older man in a dark gray coat was weaving through the emptying pews, walking slowly but with purpose. His hair was white, his steps unsteady, but his eyes, sharp, tired, and deeply knowing, were fixed on me. When he reached the back, the guards stiffened. He raised a hand. "It's all right," he said quietly. "I just need a moment with him." The lead officer frowned but nodded, stepping aside. The old man stopped a few feet away and looked at me. "James Lane," he said softly, as if testing whether I'd respond. I studied him. Something about his face tugged at my memory, the deep lines, the weary dignity. Then it clicked. "You worked with my father," I said. He nodded. "Henry Cole. His attorney, and his oldest friend." The name struck me like a jolt. Henry Cole had been my father's personal lawyer for over 2 decades. Seen in our house 100 times growing up, his briefcase always in hand, his voice always calm and precise. But I hadn't seen him since before my trial. He looked at me for a long moment before speaking again. "Your father left something for you," he said. My throat tightened. "For me?" "Yes." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope, thick, yellowed slightly at the edges. The wax seal bore the imprint of my father's signet ring, the same one he'd worn every day of his life. The sight of it made my stomach twist. The guards exchanged uncertain glances, but Henry's authority, and his grief, kept them silent. He held out the envelope. "He instructed me to give you this, personally. He said it was important." I stared at it, my hands trembling slightly. "When did he give it to you?" Henry hesitated. 2 weeks ago." 2 weeks ago. My father had known he was dying. He had known I was still in prison, still branded guilty, still despised. And yet, he'd written me something he hadn't had the courage to say in life. I took the envelope, the paper rough beneath my fingertips. The guards didn't stop me. Maybe even they sensed this moment mattered. Henry's voice lowered. "He carried a heavy burden, James. One he couldn't set down until the end. That letter, it's the truth he couldn't speak." My pulse quickened. "What truth?" He looked away. "It's not my place to say." I wanted to demand answers, to tear open the letter right then and there. But something in his tone stopped me, a quiet respect, a warning, maybe even guilt. He reached out, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Whatever you find in those words, son, know that your father loved you. Even when he didn't know how to show it." Then he turned and walked away, his cane tapping softly against the stone floor. I sat there, staring at the letter, the wax seal glinting faintly in the light. For years, I had wanted to hear my father say he was wrong. Now, I was about to find out if he ever could. Chapter 5, The Letter. For a long time, I just stared at the envelope in my hands. It felt heavier than it should have, as if the weight of every unanswered question, every sleepless night, every silent year had been sealed inside it. The church was almost empty now. Mourners drifted out into the pale gray afternoon, their voices echoing faintly in the hall. The scent of flowers and old wood lingered, mingling with the faint metallic tang of the cuffs around my wrists. "Are you ready to go?" one of the guards asked softly. I shook my head. "Just a minute." He hesitated, then nodded, stepping back. My fingers traced the seal, my father's signet ring mark, stamped deep into the red wax. That ring had been a symbol of everything he stood for: order, judgment, authority. And now it guarded the truth he had kept from me for 3 long years. With a deep breath, I tore it open. The paper inside was old-fashioned, thick, cream-colored stationery, the kind my father always used for his letters and legal notes. The handwriting was unmistakably his, sharp, measured, and painfully familiar. "My son, if you are reading this, I am gone. I could not bring myself to face you while alive." I told myself it was duty, but the truth is, it was fear. My breath caught. I read the words again, slowly, as if trying to convince myself they were real. "You always believed in me, more than I deserved. And when the world turned against you, you looked to me to speak. I didn't. I failed you. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I blinked hard, forcing myself to go on. You were innocent, James. I knew it from the beginning. But when I discovered the truth, that your brother was responsible, I made a choice I can never undo. He came to me the night before your arrest, terrified, desperate. He begged me to protect him. And I did. My hands trembled violently. My heart pounded in my chest. I told myself I was saving my family, that I could fix it quietly later. But every day I stayed silent, the lie grew heavier. I thought I had time. I was wrong. The ink trailed faintly near the bottom, as though he had paused, struggling to continue. I have left documents with Henry Cole, bank records, statements, and a full confession signed by your brother. By the time you read this, the truth will be in motion. You will be free. A small sound escaped me, something between a gasp and a cry. I pressed the paper against my chest, as if holding it closer could make the pain easier to bear. My father had known. All along. He had watched me go to prison for something I didn't do, and he had kept the secret locked inside his heart. Why? Because he loved Daniel? Because he couldn't stand to see another son destroyed? Or because, deep down, he believed the family name was worth more than one man's freedom? The letter continued, though the handwriting had grown shakier now, uneven and raw. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope that someday you'll understand what it cost me to keep silent, and what it will cost me no longer. I'm proud of you, James. Even when I couldn't say it. The final line was barely legible, the ink smudged as if by a shaking hand. I love you, my son. Always. I lowered the paper, unable to move. The words echoed in my head like a ghostly whisper, half comfort, half confession. The guard stood quietly nearby, unsure what to do. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the stained glass windows, scattering light across the coffin. For the first time, I saw my father not as the judge who condemned me, but as a broken man who had finally confessed his sin, too late to say it out loud. I folded the letter carefully, pressing the wax seal flat with my thumb. My voice was barely a whisper. Thank you, Dad, I said. But the truth doesn't end here. And as I stood to leave, I knew that the reckoning, for Daniel, for all of us, had only just begun. Chapter 6, The Truth Revealed. For a few moments, I couldn't move. The letter trembled in my hands as I stared at the coffin at the front of the church. My father's words burned in my mind, raw and undeniable. He had known. He had protected Daniel. And he had chosen silence, until it killed him. James? I looked up. Henry Cole stood nearby, watching me with quiet understanding. His eyes were heavy with something deeper than sympathy, guilt. Did you know? I asked, my voice low, shaking. He hesitated before answering. I suspected. Your father came to me 2 weeks before he died. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in years. He told me everything, about Daniel, about the money, about you. My throat tightened. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Because he begged me not to, Henry said, his voice barely above a whisper. He wanted to make it right himself. He was preparing to go public, to clear your name officially. But his heart gave out before he could. I felt my knees weaken. The guards shifted closer, but I waved them off. I didn't need their pity. Henry reached into his coat again and pulled out a small brown folder, thick with papers. These are the documents he left with me. Bank transfers, account logs, Daniel's confession, signed and notarized. I sent copies to the district attorney this morning. I stared at the folder as if it might vanish if I blinked. So, it's real? Henry nodded slowly. It's real. You'll be a free man, James. It might take a few days for the court to process it, but it's over. Your father made sure of that. The words hit me like a wave. For 3 years, I'd dreamed of hearing them, "You're free." But now, they didn't feel like victory. They felt like loss. My father had finally done the right thing, but he wasn't here to see it. The one thing I'd wanted, to look him in the eye and hear him say he believed me, would never happen. I sank back onto the pew, the letter still clutched in my hand. He could have told me, I whispered. He could have just come. Henry's expression softened. He tried. The night before he died, he called me from the hospital. He said he was going to write you a letter. He wanted you to know the truth from him, not from anyone else. I swallowed hard, trying to hold myself together. And Daniel? Henry looked away. He hasn't been seen since the day your father passed. He didn't attend the will reading. I believe he knew what was coming. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. Running from ghosts and guilt sounds like something he'd do. For a moment, silence settled between us. The only sound was the soft hum of the church's heater and the faint rattle of rain against the stained glass windows. Then Henry spoke again, his tone firm but gentle. Your father wasn't perfect, James. He made terrible choices. But he died trying to make them right. Don't let that go to waste. I looked at him, then down at the folder. Inside were the keys to my freedom, the proof that could destroy my brother's life but rebuild mine. I stood slowly, every motion deliberate. He saved me, I said quietly. But he also saved Daniel, all those years ago. I guess it's time to finish what he started. Henry nodded. Whatever you choose, do it with peace in your heart. That's what he wanted. I turned one last time toward the coffin. The candles flickered beside it, their flames swaying as if in silent acknowledgement. Goodbye, Dad, I whispered. You finally gave me justice. I'll take it from here. As I walked toward the exit, the guards following behind, I didn't feel the weight of chains anymore. I felt something else, fragile but growing. Freedom. Chapter 7, The Last Goodbye. The church had emptied almost entirely. Only a few mourners lingered near the exit, speaking in hushed tones, their shadows stretching long across the polished floors. I remained in the back pew, gripping the letter and the folder of evidence like lifelines. The truth was finally in my hands, proof that I had been innocent all along. My mother, standing near the front, finally noticed me. Her veil had slipped slightly, revealing tear-streaked cheeks and eyes swollen from crying. For a moment, she didn't move. Her hands trembled as she clasped them together, as if she were holding herself upright. James, she whispered. Her voice cracked, small and fragile. I wanted to rush to her, to embrace her, to tell her everything would be okay now. But the cuffs around my wrists reminded me that I was still a prisoner, and that our reunion would be measured, careful, cautious. I'm here, Mom, I said quietly, standing slowly. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hoarse, foreign, like a man returning from the grave. She took a tentative step toward me. Her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and fear. I didn't know if I'd ever see you again, she said. Her lips quivered as she took another step. I prayed every day. I know, I said, trying to hold back the wave of emotion threatening to break me. I prayed too. Then Daniel appeared. He had been lingering near the pulpit, pretending to straighten the floral arrangements and avoid attention. When he saw me, his face paled. His posture stiffened. I could see the guilt written across every line of his body. James, he said, his voice low, forced, almost a whisper. I looked at him. The brother I had once trusted, once loved, the one I had thought of as a friend, now looked smaller, not in size, but in spirit. The confident, polished Daniel I had known was gone, replaced by a man shadowed by fear. "You knew," I said simply. He didn't answer at first. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple moving like a visible knot. I didn't mean for any of this to happen," he finally muttered. "You lied," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And Dad protected you. And you let me rot for 3 years. Do you know what that felt like?" His gaze dropped. He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I could see it, the truth was now heavier than he could carry. My mother stepped closer to Daniel and put a hand on his shoulder. "He's free now, James," she said softly. "Don't let anger take this from you. It's time to move forward." I took a deep breath and looked at my mother. Her love had never wavered, even when my father had failed me, even when the world had branded me guilty. She had endured in silence, carrying the weight of her grief alongside mine. I walked toward her, carefully. The cuff scraped lightly against the pew, a sharp reminder of the past, but I didn't care. I embraced her. She clung to me tightly, sobbing, as if trying to undo the years we had lost. When I pulled back, I looked at Daniel one last time. "You have to live with your choices," I said quietly. "I'll live with mine. And one day, maybe we can start over. But not today." He nodded, unable to speak. His guilt was a shadow that would not leave him easily. I turned toward the exit. The church was silent now, save for the occasional drip of rain outside and the faint echo of footsteps on the marble floor. Henry Cole waited near the door, holding my father's signet ring and a folder of documents. For the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. The truth was no longer buried. The chains were still here physically, but they no longer held me spiritually. I paused at the doorway, glancing back one last time at the coffin, the candles flickering beside it. "Goodbye, Dad," I whispered. "I'll take it from here." And then I stepped outside. The air was crisp, wet from the lingering rain. The world felt larger now, freer, filled with possibility. I was ready. Chapter 8, Freedom's Dawn. The cell door clanged open, a sound I had dreamed of for 3 long years. I froze for a moment, staring at the empty corridor beyond, the fluorescent lights harsh against the dull gray walls. The guard stepped back, watching me with the same caution as when I had first arrived here, years ago. But today was different. Today, I was not just walking out of a prison. I was walking into life again. Henry Cole stood at the gates, holding the folder of evidence and my father's signet ring. The faint rain from the morning had stopped, leaving the streets glistening, the air crisp and clean. He looked at me with that same quiet intensity one had seen in the church, the kind that made me feel both accountable and protected at the same time. "You're free, James," he said softly. "Everything is in motion. Your name will be cleared in the official records within the week." I nodded, swallowing hard. 3 years of anger, bitterness, and helplessness swelled inside me, threatening to spill over. But I didn't let it. I let it settle, quiet and heavy, ready to be shaped into something new. "What about Daniel?" I asked, my voice steady but low. Henry shook his head. "He's gone. The authorities will handle him once they trace the evidence. Your father made sure the trail would lead to him. Justice will be served." I looked down at the folder, running my fingers over the papers inside. Bank statements. Confessions. Everything I needed to prove my innocence and bring closure to the years stolen from me. And yet, the documents felt almost secondary to the letter I had read in the church. My father's last words, his confession, his apology, and his love, were the true liberation. I stepped out of the gates, the city streets stretching before me like an endless horizon. Cars splashed through puddles. The scent of wet asphalt and blooming flowers filled the air. Freedom had a sound, a smell, a weight I hadn't realized I was missing until now. My mother waited nearby, her face pale but radiant with relief. She stepped forward, arms open. I embraced her, feeling her heartbeat against mine. Years of separation, doubt, and fear vanished in that one moment. I never stopped believing in you, she whispered into my ear. I know, I said, holding her tightly. And I never stopped hoping. Henry handed me my father's ring. I slid it onto my finger. It was heavy, a reminder of the past, of mistakes, of the love and failures of a man who had been both judge and father. We walked together toward the car Henry had brought, a sleek black sedan waiting patiently by the curb. I glanced back once, seeing the gates behind me, the towering prison walls, the life I had endured. Then I let go of the memory. There was no room for chains anymore. Henry spoke gently. Your father would want you to live fully now, James. To rebuild your life, and maybe even your family, if that's possible. I looked at him, a faint smile tugging at my lips. He gave me a second chance. I'll make it count. The driver started the car, and we pulled away. I watched the streets pass by, the children playing, the vendors calling out, the ordinary life I had missed. Every color seemed brighter. Every sound clearer. For the first time in years, I felt the possibility of tomorrow. Not the weight of the past, not the bitterness of betrayal, not the shadows of lost time. Only the warmth of the sun breaking through clouds and the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. I leaned back in the seat, folding my hands over the folder. Freedom wasn't just leaving prison. It was reclaiming my life. My dignity. My future. And as the city unfolded before me, bright and alive, I whispered to the wind, to my father, and to myself. I'm free. And I'm ready to live. The road ahead was long, but it belonged to me now.